Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Emmanuel. He is currently 3 months old, almost 4 months. Thought I would bring him in at the start just to say hi since he's awake. Hi! You're chunky. Hi. Okay, you can have him back now. Alright, so as you can see from the title of this video, this is all about my postpartum experience and essentials. But before we get into that, I need to give you guys context and basically let you know how my birth story went. I haven't really talked about it. There is a video on my birth and delivery, but I didn't really go into detail on what happened. So I need to get into that first to give you guys some context. Then we'll go into my postpartum experience and what my essentials were. So if you're not aware already, Emmanuel is an IVF baby. We had to go through IVF to have him, and we reached my due date and he was still baking away inside and just happy to stay in there. So we actually had to get him induced. So I was induced at 40 weeks and 4 days, which is a little bit earlier than I guess the normal, and that's because if you do have an IVF pregnancy, there's higher risk of the placenta detaching itself from the lining or something like that. I don't know the technical term, but it was safer to get induced earlier rather than later. So I went in for my induction at 40 weeks and 4 days, planning for a vaginal delivery, and everything that I had packed and everything that I had prepared for was for a vaginal delivery, and I guess you guys know where this is going by now. Of course, I was aware that an emergency C-section was possible, but I was definitely hoping for a vaginal delivery, that after 13 hours of being in labor, he just was not facing the right way. So Emmanuel was right down there. I was about 9 centimeters dilated after about 13 hours. His head was right there. He was ready to go, but he was facing sideways. And twice my OB actually tried to basically manually twist him to the right direction, but that just didn't work. In order for that to happen, I had to push, and my OB would basically reach in with his hand and try and twist him, which does sound very painful, but I did have an epidural, so I didn't feel it. Although I gotta say, with an epidural, it's really hard to push because you do not feel anything down there. You're basically dead down there. My legs were just dead. I was dead, and so when they were like, you need to push, I was like, I don't even know if I'm pushing. I think I am, but I can't even feel it. So it's a very weird sensation to have an epidural and to have to push your baby out. My OB tried to do that twice, and he was still facing in the wrong direction. So after about 13 hours, he made the call and he said, we have to go to a C-section. So by the time we reached the theater, I believe I was 10 centimeters dilated already, but once again, he was just facing the wrong way. Because he was right down there, he was actually stuck. And so they had to actually reach in and push him back up so that he could be delivered via C-section. And what happened was they had to open up the incision a bit more to make room for his head, because his head was all sort of stretched and elongated by this point because he was down there stuck for so long, and they tried to twist him. And also I had a fibroid, which if you don't know what that is, just Google it. Usually they would just leave the fibroid in there and they wouldn't do anything about it, but the fibroid was in the way of getting the baby out. So that's why my C-section incision had to be longer than normal. So because they had to take the fibroid out, I lost a lot of blood. I lost about 900 ml, so almost a liter of blood because of the fibroid. And it took a while to patch me all back up and stuff because of that. Then fast forward a couple of days after delivery, I was still feeling very nauseous. So I felt nauseous all throughout the whole labor and delivery. Even when I was on the theatre table, I felt nauseous. I just felt nauseous the whole time. And 2 or 3 days later, I was still feeling very nauseous, as if I wanted to throw up all the time. And so because of that, I actually had to get a blood transfusion to feel better. And after the blood transfusion, I felt so much better, and then I was able to leave the hospital to visit my baby in NICU, who was in another hospital by then. Now, if you're unaware, if you haven't seen the birth video, Emmanuel was actually in NICU for 3 weeks because he had congenital pneumonia. You can watch the video down below. I'll have it linked. Now, on top of the blood transfusion, once I was discharged, my doctor saw that I had actually had an allergic reaction to the dressing that was on the wound. And apparently that is super, super rare. It rarely ever happens. I'm not allergic to anything, or I thought I was not allergic to anything. I can eat anything under the sun, but for some reason I was just allergic to the dressing, and so the skin had sort of started to burn around the wound. So the pain that I was actually feeling post-delivery was because of that, and I thought it was normal. I thought all of that pain was very normal, and I was sort of just accepting it for what it was until my doctor saw that I had actually burnt, and then the skin started to blister, and then the blister a few days later popped. I know this sounds disgusting, and then it was bleeding. And so I had to get my wound redressed, I think for a total of 4 or 5 times. I don't remember now, but because I was in hospital visiting my baby in NICU anyway, I was also making daily trips to emergency to get my wound redressed. I am not exaggerating there. That was exactly what I was doing, because it just kept bleeding until it eventually stopped bleeding and it was just pus, which I know that sounds gross, but that's what was happening. And so yeah, my birth and delivery was not straightforward. And that is basically the context of this video. Now, in terms of my postpartum experience, I think that it was probably a lot worse than an elective C-section, because mine was an emergency C-section. Also, I was out and about visiting my baby in NICU all the time, so I wasn't getting the rest that I usually would have. So my recovery was longer, and what I was experiencing was probably worse than your average C-section. So basically, I felt like I could barely move. And so because when you do get a C-section, it's major surgery, you cannot use your ab muscles afterwards. And you may not realize this, but you actually use your ab muscles for everything. And so that makes moving very difficult. I remember I was basically just like really slowly shuffling if I had to walk. And if I had to walk like further than outside my hospital room, I would actually use a wheelchair. So I was in a wheelchair probably for the first whole week if I had to go out and about. Otherwise, I'll just very, very slowly shuffle to the bathroom and back. Now, getting out of bed was a whole nother story. That was so difficult. In the hospital, at least you can elevate the bed and put the bed back down. So that makes things a little bit easier, but just the motion of getting up out of bed and actually getting back into bed is so difficult when you're not supposed to use your ab muscles. So a lot of the time when I was doing that, I would kind of rip open my wound a little bit, the bit that I had an allergic reaction to, and at the time I didn't realize that's what was happening. I thought that pain was just normal. Basically, I just was very immobile. To shower, I actually had to get my husband to help me shower because I could only really do my top half. I couldn't bend, I couldn't wash my legs or anything because, like I said, you can't use your ab muscles. And so yeah, I really felt like a disabled person. And I remember day 3 of postpartum, I was pretty down at that point because my baby was in NICU, and on top of that, I felt like a disabled person, and so I couldn't even just put all my energy into my baby being sick. I had to also try and look after myself. My husband had to try and look after me, as well as go and see the baby. Like, I remember feeling pretty down about that, which is very, very normal. But yeah, I just felt like such a disabled person, and I was just like, how am I ever going to look after a baby if I feel this way now and I'm just so immobile? But after probably 1.5 weeks, I started to, like, you basically start to slowly get a little bit better. So I was in hospital for a full week. Once I was discharged and I was at home, I found it so difficult to get in and out of bed, because it's not a hospital bed, so you can't elevate it or do anything like that. It's also a lot higher. I ended up watching a video on how to get up out of bed and back into bed with abdominal surgery, and I would totally recommend that. I will try and find the video and link that down below. I basically did a variation of that, and then once I worked out how to get out of bed, that's what I would do all the time. And so I would have to get up and pump in the middle of the night, I think 3 or 4 times, because I was trying to build my milk supply. My baby wasn't home yet, and I just remember each time having to slowly get up out of bed. It was just such a drainer. And like, if I needed to go to the toilet, it's just like a whole process. Also, if I needed to cough, it hurt so bad. And I remember coughing in the middle of the night, and it was just so difficult because I couldn't just get up and have a glass of water. Like I said, it's so hard to get out of bed. When you cough, it really hurts. Like, you try and press down on the wound so it doesn't cause too much movement, but it really does hurt. I think I've said that enough times now. So I think I was able to start showering on my own from about maybe 2 or 3 weeks postpartum. And even then I was moving very slowly. But I was at least more independent to be able to do that, and getting out of bed was slowly starting to get a little bit easier. Now, that was the major postpartum experience for me. The other couple of things was that I had major night sweats. Now, I didn't know this was a thing, but apparently it is a postpartum thing. And so I would wake up in bed and be just sweating. And that happened probably for like 2 or 3 weeks. It lasted for that long. And yeah, apparently it's just a very normal part of postpartum. Another thing I experienced was my face got very dry. And I know this is also a symptom of pregnancy. During pregnancy, I didn't really get dry skin, but postpartum, I definitely did. My face was really dry. The other thing was my legs swelled up a lot. I didn't really get swelling during the pregnancy, but my legs turned into tree trunks after delivery. And so the hospital gave me compression socks, which I wore for quite a long time. I believe I wore them for like 2 weeks postpartum, and then they slowly just went down and didn't look like tree trunks anymore. Now, in terms of postpartum hair loss, I don't think I've had too much of that yet, although I think it may be starting to happen. Okay, so let's get into my postpartum essentials. Now, I just want to say, if you're packing for your hospital bag now, or you're thinking about packing for your hospital bag, just keep in mind that even if you're planning or wanting a vaginal birth, it may turn into an emergency C-section. So you may need to pack a couple of things to accommodate for that. Now, the first thing that really helped me, and this would help for any type of delivery, were these mesh undies. And I got these from Baby Bunting. I think you can get them from Amazon as well. And the reason why they're so good is because they're just really soft. With the C-section wound, you just want something that's not going to hurt it, and something that's just going to sit very comfortably over your bump, because you still will have a bump postpartum. And so these are really good. You can wash them and reuse them a few times. So I used these for a few days postpartum, along with some maternity pads, which, by the way, I actually think they just are exactly the same as overnight good night pads that you wear when you have your normal period. So you don't necessarily need to go and get maternity pads, just get the good night ones. They look exactly the same to me. So I was using that along with these undies. Just keep in mind also that because these are mesh and they're not like regular underwear, you can't actually stick your pad on, you just place it on without taking off the sticky bits. So I used that, and then when my wound didn't feel as tender anymore, it still felt tender but not as tender, I was able to wear these Depends underwear, because this does feel a lot tighter. But these are really good. They're not sexy at all, they're massive, but they're really good because you don't need to use pads along with it. It's basically adult diapers or adult nappies, so you just place these on and you don't need to worry about pads. So I used these for a good a week and a half, 2 weeks postpartum, after I was done with the mesh undies, and I highly recommend them. And then when I was done with both of those, I switched to high waist undies. So these were the high waist undies that I got from Kmart. They're super comfortable. You definitely want to get some high waisted underwear in case you do have a C-section, because you can't wear your normal underwear because it would sit exactly where your wound is. So I would say definitely get a couple of them, just in case. These were a lifesaver for me. The other thing is also, even if you don't have a C-section delivery, because you've still got a bump and you're feeling a bit jiggly, it might actually feel good to get some high-waisted underwear just to hold everything in. Now, on top of that, I wore my Tubie Grip. So this is my Tubie Grip, which the hospital provided. I'm not sure if your hospital will provide it. If not, I highly recommend it. It's basically just this piece of fabric. It basically goes from the bottom of where your underwear would sit all the way up to just under your bra, and it just helps hold everything in. And it definitely helped me with my C-section wound, because you are so fragile there that when you move or sit down or anything, you can just feel the wound. And so if you're wearing something tight like this over on top, which you might think it would hurt, it doesn't. It actually just helps hold it in place. This is very, very helpful. This is also machine washable, and so I used this and wore this for about 2 to 2.5 weeks postpartum. I also found these flushable wipes really, really handy, even though I didn't have a vaginal delivery. Because I had a C-section delivery, it was, like I said, very difficult to move. It's also difficult to twist. So this is going to sound TMI, but basically if you're on the toilet and you're doing a number 2, you don't really want to twist too much to wipe. And so using flushable wipes helps with that, because you don't need to use too much force or labor to wipe, if that makes sense. You get where I'm getting at there. So these were super helpful. Now I also packed this along with a straw to the hospital, and I used it in the hospital as well as a couple of weeks postpartum when I was still finding it very difficult to get out of bed. And it was actually super helpful, especially when I was coughing in the middle of the night. I'd have to scream out to feel my husband, and he would have to run around and bring this to me so I could drink some water from the straw and not have to get out of bed to do it. You would be surprised at how helpful this is. Now I'm going to move on to some breastfeeding related postpartum stuff now, and I realize not everyone is going to be breastfeeding, so you can skip through this next part. But if you are breastfeeding, the one thing first that you will definitely need is a nursing bra or a few nursing bras that are going to be comfortable enough to sleep in. Now I packed these to the hospital, and I had read in the reviews that they were comfortable to sleep in, and they definitely are. These are from Kmart, and I basically live in these now all day, every day. I haven't moved to a different nursing bra yet, even though I do have them. These are just so comfortable, and you know, if you're not used to sleeping with a bra, this definitely is the way to go. It's very comfortable. You won't feel like you're sleeping in a bra. So yeah, I highly recommend something like this. Next up, if you are breastfeeding, you will need a couple of things to help you along the way, and I want to do a separate video on that. But firstly, I just want to say that if you are breastfeeding, even if you're doing it correctly, chances are it's still going to hurt at the start, because you just need, your nipples need a chance to get used to a human being sucking at it constantly. So something like this, which is lanolin cream, this one is Lancino, you will need this, and you basically apply it after every single time you breastfeed, is going to be super helpful. You will definitely need something like this. And the other thing that really helped me was these hydrogel breast discs. So what you can do with these is you put them in the fridge, and then you basically just stick it on your nipple, so one on each side, and they're very cooling and hydrating, and it just helps your nipples as you are getting used to breastfeeding. And I couldn't have lived without this, and I've still got a box even though I've stopped using them for a while now. These are highly recommended. Now moving on to just regular everyday attire, I would highly recommend that you go out and buy some clothes before you have your baby that is in a bigger size, because chances are you are not going to pop straight back to your pre-pregnancy size unless you're very lucky. I certainly didn't, and so I did get some loungewear in advance because I also knew I was going to be spending a lot of time at home. I guess we're all used to that now because of COVID anyway, but if you go out and get some cute loungewear sets in bigger sizes, it just helps you feel a bit better. You have something that fits, you feel a bit cute, and it definitely helps with your postpartum experience. So I went out and bought some matching sets in a size bigger than my normal size. So these are the shorts, and this is the matching sweater that goes with it, and you guessed it, yes, it's from Kmart. You don't necessarily need to go out and spend a lot of money on new clothes, but I would definitely suggest at least a few things just to make you feel better, and you deserve it. You've just popped out a human being. In saying that, you might want to also get a couple of things that you can wear out that are in a bigger size as well, just so that you can go out and you don't realize that you suddenly don't fit into anything because you don't fit into your maternity stuff and you don't fit into your pre-pregnancy stuff. And so I have had to do that. This dress, for example, is a new item that I had to buy because my top half just doesn't fit into anything anymore. So feel free to do that before you've had your baby, or you might want to wait till after you've had your baby so you know what size you need. I do also recommend wearing your maternity leggings or your maternity jeans postpartum. You can definitely still wear those. I still wear them as well. I really like these ones from a brand called Caden Shea, I think is how you pronounce it. These ones are the shorts. I also have the full length leggings, and I like these ones because you can wear them postpartum because they're really tight. So they're kind of like compression, but they're not specifically for postpartum, but you can wear them for pregnancy as well as postpartum. So these ones are super comfortable as well as their leggings. So that's it for my postpartum experience and essentials. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you're about to have a baby, or if you've already had a baby, let me know what your postpartum experience was like, because I would love to know. Also follow me on Instagram at Love Chic Styling, because I do post a lot of IG stories there. And if you haven't seen my other baby related content, I will have them linked in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.